Okay, so as of right now, I believe we are recording. So welcome everyone. My name is Gail Rappa and I'm the Humanities Coordinator for Great Basin College. And first off, I would like to acknowledge that today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, January 27th from sundown to sundown. It's an international day of commemoration to remember the victims of the Holocaust, the anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp in 1945, and the UN Holocaust Memorial Day. So let's start with that. And I am excited that we have such a wonderful guest with us today. Let me see if I can get everybody's on there. Great. Hadley Noren is Northeastern Nevada education spokesman for the Governor's Council for matters relating to the Holocaust. She offers Holocaust professional development classes to teachers, a Holocaust book club through the public library, and an after-school program at Flagview Elementary School called SAG, Students Against Genocide. Welcome, Hadley. And you are also the librarian for Flagview Middle School.
Thank you for having me, Gail.
Oh, we're so excited. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I had a few questions, and then we'll go over a little bit of history, and then we're going to look at some of the artwork from some of the students that you did the lesson with. But first off, I wanted to learn a little bit about you and what your personal history is with the Holocaust history. How old were you when you first learned about the Holocaust?
You know, I have three memories from elementary school. My father fought in World War II, and my mother was a senior in high school when we got bombed at Pearl Harbor. So older parents, so I had a little connection there. But in elementary school, I don't remember them talking about it. But I had a friend who lived down the street from me. Her name is Jairus Dudoff, and one day I was over playing at her house, and her mom was doing dishes, and her mom had a tattoo from Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. And I thought, a woman with a tattoo? It was strange back then, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I went home and I asked my mom about it. And that was my first experience with even hearing about it. Mm-hmm. My other experiences, I had a friend named Maggie Burns, and I grew up on Long Island. I grew up in the Hamptons. And so we had inlets that kind of came in off the bay, and they had little bridges for the cars to go over. And Maggie and I can distinctly remember we would find some change on the dryer and go down to the little corner candy store and buy a few, back then, almost penny candy. And we would hide under the bridge, and we would pretend that we were hiding from the Nazis. Hmm. And the third one, I can distinctly remember watching Anne Frank as a sixth grader in our auditorium in my elementary school. Mm-hmm. So exposed quite young. Mm-hmm. I did spend a year at boarding school in Connecticut, and I was the youngest of three girls. So when I went to boarding school, I was last to leave the house. So my mom moved to Phoenix to be near my grandmother. And I left a year later and ended up back in Phoenix. But the way that my boarding school was set up, they had 7 mods a year. So it wasn't a semester. So mm-hmm. when I arrived in the Phoenix area, I was half credit short to graduate on time. So I hooked up with a history teacher, and he said, pick an era, write me a 15-page paper, I'll give you the credit. And lo and behold, I picked the Holocaust. Uh-huh. My mom and I went to probably every library in Phoenix researching it because I loved it. Yeah, I wanted to know. So that's kind of my original background. When I got to Elko 28 years ago and became a librarian, I started hearing about classes that they were putting on in Reno. Mm-hmm. So I started attending, and about 10 years ago, he's not the chairman anymore, but Doug Unger, who was running the Jewish Federation out of Las Vegas, approached me and asked me if I would be his Northeastern spokesperson, and I jumped at the position, and I have loved everything I've done ever since. So
That's
It's
fantastic.
been about 10 years.
Yeah, that's a shout out to the power of early teachers for providing those opportunities. So tell us a little bit about the Governor's Council for Matters Relating to the Holocaust.
Okay, so it was established in 1989 with a pretty nice budget, $100,000. It was voted in with the legislation. Of course, with the pandemic, our budget has
Mhm.
gone down quite a bit, but they employ 4 educators throughout the state, 2 in Reno, 1 in Las Vegas, and myself here in Elko. And, you know, through what we do, we reach thousands of people with children. One great thing that I love about the ladies in Reno is they do a December class, and anybody that attends their class, it's a 1-day
Mhm.
class, then we are given the opportunity, and I say we because of Clayton Temple, who is a 6th grade teacher here with me. He's kind of my right-hand man. He's out of town today, but he and I go every year, except of course this year. And it enables us to take students back to Reno in the spring for a Holocaust dinner where they have 2 breakout sessions
Uh-huh.
and then a formal dinner. The gentleman, and I'm not going to think of his last name. He owns the Atlantis, John Farahi, I believe it is.
Mhm.
Um, he is so generous. He puts us up at the Atlantis for free. Our students, our chaperones, our teachers.
Fantastic.
He helps a great deal because it's held at the dinner is held at the Atlantis. He donates unbelievable things. But it's so wonderful for our students from Elko to be able to go to Reno,
Mhm.
spend the night, attend something like that with the breakout sessions, you know, different topic every year.
Mhm.
So it depends. And we're limited to how many students we can take, but it's a great, and then they get to spend the night at the Atlantis, and the following day, the chairperson for Jewish Nevada right now, Judy Schumer, she takes us on a tour of her synagogue.
Mhm.
We meet the rabbis, we learn about the Jewish history and
Mhm.
whatnot. At their synagogue, they have actual scrolls that were partially destroyed in World War II
Oh, wow.
that they have on a display. So
Mhm.
that's really powerful as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But yeah, we reach thousands through symposiums and the dinner. And
Mhm.
I mean, I do the after school group, which isn't great right now
Mhm.
with the hybrid schedule. But last year we had about 33 kids that came. It's twice a month
Mhm.
for 45 minutes, and we had 35 kids that came. Another thing that I do with my SAG group as a reward for them is, I don't know if anybody remembers Lisa Dunn. She used to run the Casino Express. She's
Mhm.
currently the director at the Wendover Historic Airfield,
Mhm.
which was a huge airfield during World War II. It's where we trained our pilots to drop the bombs on Japan.
Mhm.
But she welcomes us over there, and then everybody gets to go. So they get to do that very fun field trip. And Lisa takes good care of us. We get the special treatment.
Mhm.
Um, it's, we take picnic lunches and we get a bus and we go over and spend the day. And she's really turned it into a World War II museum. So it's beautiful if anybody has, time to stop by there.
That's fantastic. I didn't know about that.
So,
Wonderful. Um,
oh, it's amazing. I could camp out and spend days there.
oh, cool. Oh, great. Road trip, huh? Um, so
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the lesson that you initially shared with me that led to the student artwork.
Well, you reached out to me, and so I went into Clayton Temple and Stephanie Alexander's room. They're 6th grade teachers. They're a pod, so they work together. Um, and I just did an overall over the Holocaust for them.
Mhm.
And then we gave them some time to create some artwork. We also shared some student artwork that is posted on PBS. And we just talked about it. There's a few in his class that's in SAG because he promotes it so well for us.
Mhm.
So some of the kids already knew a little bit of the background. I just tried to, get them interested. I
Mhm.
think that part of teaching the Holocaust is so important in today's world.
Yeah.
And also this whole big bullying thing that's been
Mhm.
going on for the last decade.
Mhm.
That's the Nazis were bullies.
Yeah.
So I think when we can teach our children young about what hate really can do, it's
Mhm.
important because hate is such a strong word. And students at my age, fifth and sixth graders, 10 to 12, they use the word hate like it's nothing, but it is something. It's so powerful. And as we saw with the attack on the Capitol, anti-Semitism is very alive today. And I think we need to gather these children when they're young
Mhm.
and explain to them how tragic it can be. We
Right.
need to never forget because history can repeat itself.
Mhm.
If anybody's interested in kind of doing a little research on the anti-Semitic attacks as well as attack on African Americans, the Anti-Defamation League, which is adl.org,
Mhm.
has a heat map. And you can go to that heat map, and it's the map of the United States, and it's got all these circles. You can go to all these different cities and see what's gone on. You can do it by state. I did it by state for the state of Nevada.
Mhm.
In the years 19 and 20, we had 101 incidents. Two
Wow.
of them were murders.
Wow.
So it's alive
Yeah.
everywhere,
Yeah.
everywhere.
Well,
New
that
York
kind of
City had just under 300.
yeah, that kind of leads to my next question. As both a parent and a teacher, I have a daughter who is 9, and a son who's 15. And so my question after seeing the video and reading some of the books that you suggested was, at what age do you start introducing this content? And how do you, uh, you know, how do we talk about it, with young people? My teenager, I'm not concerned about, but how do we talk about it with young people?
I think most people that are Holocaust educators would recommend 6th grade, which
Mm,
is about 11 or 12. But I do think that there are ways to introduce it a little bit younger. For example, the picture books that I gave you.
mhm,
We don't necessarily, with the younger kids, have to give the numbers 6 million or 12 million killed.
mhm,
We don't have to show them the images of the starvation of the Holocaust prisoners. But I think it is important to let them know as young as possible what tolerance is and what accepting of people that are different than we are,
mhm,
whether it be their color skin, whether it be their religious preference, um, and their sexual preference now as well.
mhm,
One of the people, one of the groups that Hitler targeted was the homosexuals.
mhm,
So I think that there are some picture books. Um, Dr. Seuss actually has a few books that talks about accepting people that are different. And there's I can't think of his name, Max somebody, he has one as well. His characters, one group of characters has dots and one of them does not.
mhm, mhm,
And the ones with dots get isolated. So I think that there are ways to sort of prepare them
mhm.
for that sort of thing, because we have to remember that 1.5 million of the Jews that Hitler murdered were children
Mm,
from, a very young age, infants to 18.
right,
So I think it's important for them also to know that just because they're little doesn't mean that they were not targeted.
right. So what are some of the books that you've read in
For me,
the SAG group?
um, one year with the SAG group, I read, Irina's story.
Mhm,
It's nonfiction about Irina Sendler, and she was in the resistance. She rescued children out of the ghettos, infants out of the ghettos.
mm,
Somehow she got permission from the Nazis to go in and out kind of as a handy woman.
mhm.
And so she would go in and talk Jewish parents into giving them their infants, and she would smuggle them out in her toolboxes.
Oh, wow.
And she saved thousands of lives. That's a pretty powerful one. We don't really read a lot of books in SAG because it's only twice a month. We tend to do different, like Nuremberg laws, which I
Mhm.
explain to my kids are almost the opposite of what Martin Luther King did for the African Americans.
Mhm.
He fought to get them those rights. The Jews for generations had those rights. They were respected citizens in Germany for many, many generations. But then Hitler did the opposite. He took those rights away from them.
Mhm.
I think that helps them to kind of picture that because of course they've learned about Martin Luther King for years. But one that I really enjoyed, which I've kind of been on the French Resistance
Mhm.
lately. One that I really enjoyed was Nightingale by Kristen Hanna.
Oh, yes.
Um, and that's historical fiction.
Mhm.
There's a lot out there.
Mhm.
I would be happy to send you a list if you wanted to post it off the top of my head. Um, I just downloaded to my Kindle The Violinist of Auschwitz.
Mhm.
There's also one called The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which is a true story. And then there's a character in that book called Sitka, is how I pronounce it. And she now has a book out called Sitka's Journey.
Mhm.
And she is targeted by the Nazis as one of their prostitutes. So she
Mhm.
gets to keep her hair. She works in an office, but she is kind of a sex slave to one of the high German Nazis. And after the war, she gets accused of working with them and she is sent to Siberia.
Oh.
So that's also, it's so horrible, right? And it doesn't end. I mean, the
Mhm.
problem with the Holocaust was that even once the Jews were liberated, or the prisoners, I mean, a lot of
Mhm.
political prisoners and Romas or gypsies, once they were liberated, some of them went home to try and find their family if anybody else had survived, and they were murdered by their neighbors. So it's just like, the civil rights movement. Just because the laws changed and we're not segregating anymore doesn't mean the
Mhm.
thinking changes.
Right.
Um, so, I've read hundreds of books. It would be, I
Yeah.
don't even know that I could do my top 10. And then I'm terrible at lending them and then they don't come back.
Right.
The Belsky brothers is also one that I would recommend. My dog's name is Belsky, but they were amazing brothers. They saved 1,200 Jews living in the forest for years. They were amazing.
Well, I'll
I love
definitely
them.
I'll take you up on your
That's why I named
offer.
my dog.
We'll put together a list and we'll post it on the Humanities Center webpage so everybody can access
Okay, that would be great.
Hadley's
I also
recommended reading.
would, can I say one other thing about books?
Yes.
Is through my journey with Governor's Council, I have created a Holocaust collection at our public library here in Elko.
Fantastic.
And so they're free.
Mhm.
I've put a lot of books in there and anybody can check them out. There are some for the younger ages as well as adult reading material in that.
Great. That's fantastic. So that people can just request, do interlibrary loan for those as well for our folks that live outside the area. We have the GBC serves the,
Absolutely.
all, the whole. Well, we have students everywhere. We actually, but as far as our interlibrary loan serves the whole state of Nevada. So yeah, fantastic. Great. Well, we'll add that information into the.
Absolutely. GBC actually has quite a few books as well. One thing that happens at that dinner at the Atlantis, that Holocaust dinner, is everybody receives a book. I always receive multiple books because I always donate one to GBC and the public library. And then I have a large collection here in my library as well.
Great. Great. We'll definitely get both those lists added to the webpage so people can access them and see. I think oftentimes if people are interested in learning more, it can be so overwhelming because like you said, there's so many books. So it's great to have an expert's kind of recommended reading list to start with. And there's wonderful fiction and nonfiction. I know that I've read a little bit of both, and wonderful, wonderful books out there. You talked a little bit about this, but I think we talked about this in the past, is so often when you're teaching history, whether it's to young children or to college students, if you don't make it relevant to their present experience, a lot of the content's not going to be retained. You know, they think it's something that's ancient history, happened a long time ago. Now times are different now. So what would you say to students, you know, who say that? And it's like, yeah, it's awful that the Holocaust happened, but you know, that was a long time ago.
Will you repeat that? You kind of blinked out for a minute.
Oh, sorry. Just what would you
Do
say
you have a
to,
specific question?
yeah, just what would you say to students who think that the history, you know, you said earlier history can repeat itself, but how do we respond to people who say, well, yeah, but that could never happen again?
I'm a true believer that there's been hate since Adam and Eve ate the apple. Um, Hate is nothing new. Hate has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. We've had wars, people, this guy hates that guy. And I just feel like I'm a real pusher, especially with my students and my own children. You know, be kind, be
Mhm.
kind. You don't have to be their best friend. You don't have to hang out with them,
Mhm.
but be kind, because I'm a true believer that everybody's loved by somebody.
Mhm.
So every one of our lives is invaluable.
Right.
I That's kind of my true belief, that
Mhm.
everybody's loved by somebody and every life is valuable. And hate takes energy,
Right.
and being kind doesn't really. A compliment doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't hurt. You don't have to work at it. Oh, I love your shoes. Makes people feel good, makes you feel good to say it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And hate's been around, and it's still around, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so when you do the lesson, the one in particular that led to the artwork that we'll see a little bit of, what kind of what kind of response do you get from the students? Do you feel like most of them are familiar with the Holocaust before you do the lesson?
Not necessarily.
Mhm.
But I do feel like it creates a lot of questions.
Mhm.
I also explained to them years ago, Rachel Wright taught first grade in Carlin when I was teaching out there. She wanted to show her first graders what a million was. So the entire community got together and we saved 1 million pennies.
Oh,
And they had it in a case, the front of the elementary school, for quite a while. And then it was cashed in. And I tell the kids that a million pennies is $10,000. And so $10,000 to them is like, whoa, that's a lot of money.
yeah.
Um, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like it, I feel like I get good question response.
Mhm.
When you talk about the numbers and you talk about, I think a real important thing to make sure that the kids understand is that the people that were murdered in the Holocaust were just like you and I
Mhm.
and everybody else here. They had lives, they had jobs, they had children, they went on picnics, they rode bikes. It makes them a little bit more human
Mhm.
to make sure that you're communicating that with your students, regardless if they're my age or college students,
Mhm.
to remind them that they had pleasures, they had loves and weddings and all those things that we have. So I think instead of just images and numbers
Mhm.
and symbols, that it's very important to make sure that they know that they were people just like you and I and everybody else, and had joys that were just yanked out from under them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And for those of you guys who didn't see in the chat, and for the people listening to the recording later on, if you go to the Humanities Center web page, you can access Hadley's full lesson that video lesson that she did, and it's very powerful, and it's about 14 minutes or so long. And it's, you talk in there a lot, which I think could be a whole other, obviously a whole other conversation about the ways that the Nazis dehumanized the Jewish population as a way of being able to justify the slaughter, but also to recruit people, to be on board, for what they were doing. And I think that dehumanization is just what you're talking about, is the need for people to realize that these were other human beings. They weren't an abstract character in a book or, something like that. These were actual human beings. So I highly encourage anybody everyone to watch that video. It's really well done. Great.
Thank
Well, do
you.
we have a little bit of time left? Do you want to go quickly over and look at some of the artwork?
Sure. I also want to just mention the Nazi propaganda, which is interesting. That was also a part of my childhood. I was the youngest of 3 girls, and my mom never allowed the words dumb and stupid in our home. And I always think of that when I think of the propaganda that the Nazis used, because my mom said, it's not allowed in the house because the more you hear it, the more you believe it. And that's exactly what the Nazis did. They had it on the radio and the posters and the newspapers because they had full control. And people just saw that the Jews were the problem. The Jews caused the problem. The Jews were to blame over and over again. And I think for the Germans, one of 2 things: they either got to that point where they started to believe it, or they were so terrified because if they said anything against Hitler, they became a political prisoner and they could be sent. So I think there's a fine line there that sometimes is hard to identify with, if you will, having not lived through it.
Absolutely.
So.
Right. And I think that's something that I'm realizing more and more as, that the more I learn about social justice issues is, we're not in this binary. We think, the binary thinking that you're either bad or good doesn't apply anymore. And I think that's something that, and I don't think ever applied, but we've had that. That's part of that. Brainwashing or propaganda is that there's good guys and there's bad guys, and there's, it's very clean cut that way. So I think that's definitely present in our present day as well. With a lot that's going on.
And I think it's important to make sure that the students understand what generalization is and that it's not a healthy thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a student the other day, I think he said, I don't like the Germans. And I said, why? And he said, well, look what they did. But there's a lot of Germans that didn't do that didn't take place. And then you have to talk about the righteous among nations, the people, the Germans that put their lives on the line to save Jewish people. And you can learn about that at the Yad Vashem website. They have a beautiful, beautiful display. Lots of wonderful, wonderful stories. Great.
Well, we'll include those links as well. I won't go into it, but there was some wonderful articles this morning. The Pope came out and made a statement. I'll just read it briefly, or just part of it. He said, the article said, he spoke 3 weeks after displays of anti-Semitism surfaced at the US Capitol riot on January 6th, and 2 weeks after one of Montreal's largest synagogues was vandalized and almost set on fire. Speaking at his general audience held inside the papal library because of coronavirus restrictions, Pope Francis said it was imperative that the world did not forget, and quote, to remember is an expression of humanity. To remember is a sign of civility. To remember is a condition for a better future of peace and fraternity. So I thought that was a beautiful, just that short statement of his was a beautiful way to sum up why we need to remember.
Very powerful.
Great. Well, we'll just run quickly through, if you have time, we'll run quickly through the images because I want to share those. And if you want me to stop at any one of them, just let me know if you have something.
Okay.
Because these are wonderful.
I think they kind of speak for themselves. The kids did a nice job.
Let's see, I'm going to go back to, there we go. So there's our first. So these are artwork from the 6th grade students from Flagview. This one in particular,
That's the front of Auschwitz. And
yeah. And I love this, the text and the showing of the different color triangles and what they symbolized. You know, really powerful. Just.
Yep. So depending on what kind of prisoner you were, you had a different color, so that the guards could identify who they were dealing with.
Right.
That's what the triangles are. They were sewn onto the uniforms.
One of the.
That's a quote from Anne Frank. I can't read it right now, but I could read it on the original. This is based off the Gail. You can see the little baby being thrown. Erica's story.
Right.
It's very powerful.
Right. Lots of images of swastika being covered up and X'd out.
I was very happy with the quotes that the kids found and things like that. Did a little writing with it because it really was supposed to be an art activity, but I was thrilled that there was some writing included in it. So
Yeah, I saw that a lot of them included quotes. Yeah, which is wonderful. Tell me a little bit about this one. This one kind of intrigued me. Do
you know what? I don't know. And I tried to go down and catch Emma to ask her about it. And she wasn't here yesterday. So I wasn't sure. I kind of, in my heart, I want to say that the eyes are looking out between the slats of the cattle cars.
Oh, right. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, we'll have to do a follow-up with Emma and find out what.
But I didn't, I questioned that one and I tried to catch Emma and she was absent yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, so much. This one in particular, I loved, of course, because it talks about the past and the future and the possibility for both. So I thought that was lovely.
Well, and I love the little kids at the bottom. Oh, can you go back one?
Yeah.
See, they have love.
Right.
Their hands spell love.
Love. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really well done. Yeah. You know, from an artistic point of view, it's so interesting to the ones that chose to work in pencil and the ones that chose to use color and where they added it and where they, you know, their choice of where to put it. It's all interesting. So another long quote on this one, which is great that they included that text.
And Primo Levi, he's got a really powerful book.
Great. And that's the last one, Tate. Great. So I'm going to thank the Flagview students for sharing your artwork to help educate us all.
Thank you. That's fabulous.
Great. All right. Well, we're a little after 12. Thank you so much, Hadley. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know how busy you are because you're at work today, working at Flagview. So thank you so much. And we will we'll make sure you get the link for this if you want to share it. And then again, all the links will be on the website for the Humanities Center.
Okay. And thank you, Gail, for having me and reaching out. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to working with you again.
Yes, to be continued, for sure. All right, take good care. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye.